Welcome to the Menopause Conversations podcast. My name's Angela Council and I'm your host for this podcast, and this is where you learn all about menopause, what is happening to your body, to your hormones, and life in general. Everything is changing and sometimes it can seem really confusing, but this is where the confusion stops right now. This podcast will share with you everything you need to know about how you can navigate your menopause transition with ease. So sit back and enjoy the show. Bye for now. Hello and welcome back to this week's episode of Menopause Conversations podcast. It is Angela here, your host for this podcast. And the last few weeks for me have been quite hectic as I have been running the free Secret to Thriving in Menopause workshop, plus introducing some beautiful women into this current round of the Embrace program. And it has been full on and has been so fulfilling as I have been learning more about these women and the feedback and the connection that I've made just in a very short time with the women who both did the workshop and those who've come on to work with me. So and that's the part of my job that I really love doing. I just love introducing this concept of thriving in menopause to as many women as possible. Now, this particular episode is yet again another recording that I did earlier this year. And this time I'm covering the topic of the pill and HRT. Now, I'm going to be the first to say, and you'll probably notice through the recording, that I'm a little bit hesitant on some of the things that I say. I am not an expert on synthetic hormones. I'm not a medical doctor. I have a pretty good idea of the impact that they have on the body, but I don't fully understand why they are so widely used, particularly for women who are coming through menopause. So you will find there's a little bit of a hesitation. I did do a lot of research before I actually recorded this particular episode. But there's a little bit of hesitation as you go through, and you'll hear that. And that's mainly because I'm referring to notes to make sure that I'm getting the information right. And because I want to make sure that what I'm sharing with you is the best quality information that I can based on the topic. And also, I'm trying to be a little bit sensitive because sometimes when I talk about HRT, some women get a little bit upset because they're thinking that I'm basically putting down everybody that is on HRT, and that's definitely not true. I know that some women, need that extra support, but I also believe that in the majority of cases, the doctors have no other solution. Well, they only have two solutions for you. One is suck it up and get on with it, and the other is, here, take this pill and it'll fix the problem. It doesn't necessarily fix the problem, and there are other solutions. And obviously that's the stuff that I know better, the other solutions, and I can talk a lot easier on those ones. But I thought it was really important that this topic was covered. So as I said, this is part of recording from a series of videos that I did earlier in the year as part of an ongoing education process that I was doing for women who are in my community. So have a listen and see what you can get out of it. See if you've got any questions, feel free to come into the Menopause Conversations Facebook group and ask the questions. Ask me more of what you want to know about, coming off HRT, using HRT, the risks to HRT, and the pill. I know a lot more about the pill than I do HRT, particularly now because HRT is a little bit changing now because it's not the synthetic hormones are not being used as much, and now we've moved to body identical, and we don't know a lot about the body identical ones. So there's not a lot of information out there. So that's another reason why I had to do some research, a little bit hesitant on how I share this information. But what I'm sharing with you is researched information. So have a listen and let me know what you think. I'll be back at the end of the podcast to have another chat with you. Bye for now. The oral contraceptive pill, or the pill, and HRT. That's what I'm going to be talking about today. I get asked quite a few questions about this. Now, please note, I am not a doctor. I do not prescribe either of these medications. I personally believe that you can get through menopause without taking these medications. I'm going to share with you why today. So this is a really big topic and can be quite controversial. But let's start with the oral contraceptive pill, or the pill. Now, the pill was basically invented by men in the late 50s and kind of became something that gave women freedom. It was part of the, the changing times of sexual revolution. Women could now go out and have sex and not have the risk of falling pregnant. And over the years, it's become more and more the done thing that, young girls are put on the pill relatively early. I personally went on the pill when I was 16 and was on the pill for over 20 years. And it was seen that that's just normal. That's what we do. But being on the pill causes lots and lots of problems, particularly with our reproductive cycle. The pill was seen as the solution to issues with your periods. And in fact, the pill never solved any issues with periods, because except for the fact that the pill stopped periods. And you might be going, what do you mean? I still had a period when I was on the pill. Actually, no, you didn't. You had a pill bleed. And there's a big difference between the bleeding that occurs when you're on the pill and a natural period. So when we're cycling naturally, we have ovulation, we release an egg, and then that egg either gets fertilized or it doesn't get fertilized. If it doesn't get fertilized, then a change in hormones causes the lining, because when the egg comes out, we have a buildup of the lining of the uterus wall. If we don't fall pregnant, then that lining sheds and we have a period. If you do fall pregnant, the egg implants in the lining, and that's where it gets its nutrition from. When you're on the pill, that doesn't happen because you don't ovulate. So really what happens is, when you're on the pill, what happens is you have 21 days of synthetic hormones, and then there is 7 sugar pills. And those sugar pills cause a bleeding, but it's not a period. It's just a pill bleed. So that's number one. We need to be aware of some of the misconceptions around being on the pill. The pill doesn't fix problems with heavy bleeding. It doesn't fix problem with your periods and everything, because in essence it stops your periods. And when we take that the next step, if you're not ovulating, in fact, what the pill does is it puts you into a chemical menopause, because it's actually stopped you from ovulating. When you're no longer ovulating, you're in menopause. And the doses of hormone that are given within the pill are quite high. And this can cause an issue, particularly when you withdraw from it. So, a lot of women are told by their doctors that the pill will prevent or delay menopause. That's not true. You can't prevent menopause. Menopause is going to happen. As I said, the pill suppresses your ovulation, which it also lowers your number of follicles, which follicles, once they is what releases the egg. And in fact, the pill can actually bring on menopause sooner. But you don't know that you've reached menopause because you still have these monthly pill bleeds. So this is where, you're still bleeding, so you don't think you're in menopause, but in fact you are. You could be, not that you are, you could be. You're in a chemical menopause, but you could have also moved into a natural menopause as well. And as I mentioned, that the pill actually has quite a high dose of hormone in it. So if your body has actually gone through that menopause stage, or it's going through that change, and then you suddenly stop taking the pill, what happens is, particularly the estrogen, which is a higher level of synthetic hormone, you stop taking the pill, all of a sudden your symptoms can get really, really bad. You may not have had any symptoms associated with menopause, but the withdrawal of that fast withdrawal of that estrogen basically puts you full-blown into a whole pile of symptoms. And it's the withdrawal of the estrogen that causes the problem. So if you are on the pill and you want to come off, you need to either come off slowly, or you need some support to get you through as you gradually come down from the high level estrogen down to the low level where you're at. And sometimes this is where HRT might come in handy, just to bridge that gap for a short amount of time, just so that you're not having this massive, great big drop. And that's estrogen-based hormone replacement, because hopefully you've still got some progesterone, but you might, depending on what your levels are, you might also need to have some progesterone as well. So we also know that women who've got a history of being on the pill for a long amount of time do have an increased incidence and severity of hot flushes. Once again, it's because of the high level of synthetic hormone, which outbalances your natural hormones. So if you're on the pill, it's better to stop that sooner rather than later, before you've actually gone through your natural menopause transition. And this can be really hard if you're just having a bleed every month because you don't know what's going on. But the sooner you do it, and just help the body to make its own hormones, so that then when you go through your menopause transition, you don't have this sudden drop in the estrogen, because we want the gradual decline of estrogen. We don't want the sudden drop. It's the drop that causes a lot of the problems. And this issue is similar for those of you who might be on the implant, so the Depo-Provera implant. Not as much of an issue with the Mirena, because the Mirena ovulation still occurs, but you just don't have the monthly bleed, so that can be an issue. But if you can actually track your cycles without a monthly bleed, and this is the same with women who've had the endometrial ablation as well, where they no longer bleed, but they're still cycling, so their hormones are cycling, and you can track that using temperature and mucus changes. So it is possible to know whether or not you're ovulating or not, even if you're not bleeding. So that's that's kind of the background and the oral contraceptive pill. I know many women are on it, but it is a myth that it stops you from going into menopause. It does not stop you from going into menopause. In fact, it may actually bring menopause along sooner, and it can actually make the symptoms even more severe when you stop. Long-term use of the oral contraceptive pill has some really significant impact on your nutritional status. Lots of nutrients are used up when you're on the pill, obviously, and it throws your hormones out of balance as well. And this might be somewhere where, and I've spoken about seed cycling before, where you could use seed cycling as you're coming off the pill to rebalance your hormones up as you're kind of coming into that next stage of life. But it doesn't stop you from going into menopause. That's a big, I don't know why doctors say that. That is a lie. In fact, as I said, it is a bit like, it actually is very similar to going into a chemical menopause, because you're stopping ovulation. So now let's talk about HRT, or also called MHT these days, which is menopause hormone therapy. Now, once again, I'm not a doctor, but I'm going to give you a little bit of an overview of what it is and the different types, because HRT was first, once again, created by men, invented by men, and it was invented by men to help women feel younger and to reverse the aging, and that's what it was there for, make us look younger, be more vibrant. It was very much a male thing as to why HRT was created, but over the years, it's becoming more and more accepted. Whereas in the past, it wasn't so much. These days, it's very, very accepted. It's almost a given that when you're coming into menopause, that you're going to be prescribed HRT. Now, my message is that you don't have to have HRT. It is a natural progression. And if you've been watching all of my other videos, I've been explaining to you what's happened with the hormones. It is a natural progression that our hormones are meant to drop down. When we're no longer ovulating, we don't need hormones at that level. And over the next few weeks, I'm going to talk to you a little bit about what you can do to counteract those shifts in hormones. Now, but there's different types of MHT or HRT. There's synthetic and there's bioidentical. Now, It is easier to get bioidentical hormones these days, or body identical hormones, they're also known as. It's a lot easier to get them. In the past, it wasn't as easy to get. Only integrative doctors here in Australia and New Zealand used to prescribe them. But now it's a little bit more mainstream, the use of the body identical hormones. And there's a little bit less risk with them. So synthetic hormones are made from different things. The synthetic hormones, Premarin, is actually made from the urine of a pregnant horse. So that's kind of where the synthetic hormones come from. But when we've got talking about body identical, then they are plant-based, and they've been created. The estrogens look very, very similar to our natural hormones, so that we have less interaction going on. But there is still some risk on the body identical ones as well. And we've got estrogen hormones, we have progesterone hormones. You can have a combination of hormones as well. You can also have testosterone as well, and DHEA, but I'm just going to talk about estrogen and progesterone mainly today. So generally, the standard prescription here in Australia, and I think New Zealand, because doctors kind of are told how they are allowed to prescribe. So what's approved for prescription. And in Australia, I believe if you still have a uterus, so you haven't had a hysterectomy, that both progesterone and estrogen get prescribed together. Once again, I'm not a doctor. So we do, as I said, we have different types of hormones. So Premarin is a synthetic estrogen made from the urine of a pregnant horse. Prometrium is a body identical progesterone. So I'm just mentioning some of the more common hormone treatments that are around. You can also get Vagifem. Now, Vagifem is estrogen only, and it's a cream. Generally, it's a cream, and it's local, and it's quite often used for vaginal dryness or bladder issues. And it's actually safer than the other ones, which you take orally, because it's just working in that area. So if you've got issues with vaginal dryness, pelvic floor, bladder, and everything, you just apply that within the vagina, and that estrogen stays there. It doesn't spread through the blood to other parts of the body. Now, Livial. I know a lot of women are on Livial, and they think it's HRT. Livial is not HRT. It is not hormones. It's actually a synthetic steroid. But it acts a little bit like progesterone, estrogen, and testosterone. So some women work well on that, but just know that it's not a hormone replacement therapy. It is actually a steroid. So steroids is what's required to make our hormones. I think I've mentioned, so I've got a few notes. I'm just making sure I've covered everything off. The standard protocol, medical protocol within Australia and New Zealand, is that if you have a uterus, that you must be prescribed estrogen and progesterone together, because progesterone is protective of the uterus wall. And if we've got too much estrogen, we have an increased risk of cancer. So they put the progesterone in that to buffer that up. If you've gone into a surgical, medical, or really early menopause, then that's a different story, because you can't have estrogen alone, because you have to have progesterone, because we need to have that buffer. So if there is still some natural progesterone being made, then it's okay to go with just estrogen. But if there's no progesterone being made, which means there's no ovulation, then it's important that we have both. There are some increased risks of taking hormone therapy, the same as there is increased risks of taking the oral contraceptive pill. And at the moment, they believe that the risks are minimal in the first 5 years. After that first 5 years, then there's a bit of controversy as to where the risks are. Is it with progesterone? Is it with estrogen? Is it with the combination? So there's different research trials out there, and they all have different results. But we do know that there is a risk after 5 years. There's an increased risk after 5 years. And a couple of the risks are increased risk of estrogen-based cancers, blood clots, and that's a big one. And a lot of women don't realize that being on the pill also increases your risk of having blood clots. And if you smoke and you're on the pill or you're on HRT, your risks of blood clots are through the roof. And also now that we've got this this extra medication that's being given, this injection that's being given to people to combat a particular virus that's going around. I can't say, be careful about what I say here. We also know that one of them has an increased risk of blood clots. And so you've got to be very careful that if you're taking the pill or you're taking hormone therapy, you already have an increased risk of blood clots. And then you add that on top of it. And we already know that there's an issue with blood clotting with one of those injections. So be very, very careful. And when they came out and said, oh, women over 50 are safe for that injection, they're not taking into account the number of women who are on hormone replacement or are on the oral contraceptive pill. If you're considering that you're going to be taking hormone replacement, it's always better to be doing that before you're actually through menopause. The benefits come in those years before you actually go into full-blown menopause. Once you're past full-blown menopause and everything's kind of settled down, and actually, in fact, once you're through menopause and more than 10 years through menopause, there is no evidence that hormone replacement works at all, and it does actually increase your risk, so it could actually cause harm. So in those years beforehand, if you make that decision, if you decide that that's for you, and not just because a doctor's told you that that is the only solution, I truly I want you to investigate this. I want you to know more about this. Don't just take a doctor's prescription to say that's the only option. I know there's many other options. I'm working with women who, we've just finished the Embrace program, 12-week program. The difference that these women, had. One woman, she was in so much pain that she could not move her hands. Her hands were kind of bent the whole time. She now has straight fingers and she can move them, and the same with her toes. Women are sleeping better, hot flushes are going, weight is dropping. So I do know that you don't need to be on hormone replacement to move through this time of life. I see it every single day. I see it all the time. But if you are on hormone replacement and you want to come off, once again, make sure you wean yourself down. And you need to there's no point just going on hormone replacement and then not addressing what's really going on. And if you don't address what's going on, when you remove those synthetic hormones and everything goes back down to really low levels, those symptoms are still going to be there because you haven't addressed what's really going on. The problem is not the hormones dropping. I'm telling you, the problem is not the hormones dropping. The trigger is the hormones dropping. The problem is what's going on underneath that. Okay, it's Angela here, back again. So what did you think of the information that I shared in that episode? Was it valuable to you? Do you now have a little bit of a better understanding of how the pill works, how HRT or MHT works, and the possible impacts that it could have on your health, your hormones, and how you look and feel? Hopefully you've got a little bit more information now that helps you to make some more informed choices. Now, one of the biggest issues that women talk to me about when it comes to changes that happens to their body as they move through menopause, and actually from what I've been told from many, many women, what's reported to me, HRT actually can make this worse, is the weight gain. The weight gain when you haven't changed anything that you've been eating, you're still doing exactly the same type of exercise, but the weight comes on particularly around the belly and what I call the meno belly. So this to me, when I ask women and I do polls within the Menopause Conversations Facebook group, this is the number one thing that comes up that concerns women as they're coming through this stage of life. So what I did was, I had this problem. I solved this problem. So I've written an ebook to provide you with a little bit of information and share some of my journey so that you can start to understand, number one, why you're getting that meno belly, and two, what you can do about it. So the link to grab this, it's free, you can get it. Just go to bit.ly, so bit.ly/menobelly, all one word, _ebook. bit.ly menobelly _ebook. Go there, put your details on the page, and then I will email that to you. And as I said, in that ebook, I share with you some of the reasons why we grow this meno belly, even though we haven't changed what we're eating, we haven't changed the way we're exercising. I explain why, and I also share with you kind of like the secret sauce, the thing that makes the difference, that when you understand this, it makes a massive difference to the way your body responds to the different foods and exercise that the food you put into it, the exercise that you do, and also understanding what's the best food for you to eat. So the best food style, diet type of thing. I don't like the word diet, but the best eating plan and the best type of exercise for you, not for anybody else, just for you. And I talk about that in this ebook as well. So grab that, bit.ly/menobelly_ebook. Go over there, grab it, download it, have a read, and you can come over into the Menopause Conversations Facebook group and let me know what you think. Ask your questions. That's it from me for this week, and I'll be back next week with another episode of the Menopause Conversations podcast. Bye for now.